Enthusiast or buyer, cars or bikes, all you need from the auto world is right here on the Autocar India YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button. When TVS first launched the Apache RR 310 late last year, they also promised us that they'd be designing a high-level one-make racing series centered around the same motorcycle. Well, that time is now here. So this is partly the story of me telling you what it's like to ride this motorcycle around a racetrack, but also it's a cautionary tale of what happens when an auto journalist goes out to race against some of the fastest riders in the country. And that's no exaggeration. These really are a highly talented bunch of riders. You see, unlike most one-make championships which act as an affordable starting point for aspiring young racers, the RR Cup is only eligible to those who've scored a podium finish in any previous national level or one-make racing championship event. 40 such riders made the cut, and they then faced off at a selection round held earlier this year, and only the quickest 12 of these qualified to compete in the inaugural RR Cup. Now, in an attempt to give us an authentic taste of this race bike, TVS invited me to come and race in the first round of the championship held at the Curry Motor Speedway in Coimbatore. So there we were, some of the fastest riders in the country, many of them national champions, and two auto journalists on wildcard seats. Okay then. But before we hit the track, let's see what TVS has done to turn the road-going RR 310 into a hardcore racing machine. Visually, the race bike is instantly recognizable as an RR, and that's because TVS has retained the stock bodywork. But there are visual changes that go beyond the tasty racing graphics, and in addition to the new switchgear, all the excess flab like the mirrors, rear mudguard, and pillion footrests have been removed. There are a few functional mods as well, starting with the rear set foot pegs that increase the bike's cornering clearance. The clip-on handlebars, meanwhile, they remain the same, but they will be lowered for faster, more flowing tracks. However, at a tight circuit like Curry, the stock position actually provides better leverage to get the bike turned in. One of the biggest changes comes in the form of a shiny new quick throttle, which goes from closed to wide open in just a small twist of the wrist. Finally, there's a slim, free-flow exhaust which works with modifications made to the air intake and ECU to liberate 4 more horses, taking the total to a respectable 38 horsepower. The exhaust system also contributes towards a total weight reduction of 13 kilos from the road bike. Beyond this, the motorcycle remains unchanged, and it runs the same suspension, brakes, sprocket sizes, and Michelin Pilot Street tires. Ultimately, these mods come together to give the bike more aggressive ergonomics for the racetrack, and a freer revving feel and slightly higher levels of performance from the engine. The result of all this is an extended and enriched experience of the stock RR's speed, stability, and friendliness. In race spec, the bike's performance is strong, but the levels of acceleration are still not in the ballpark of an RC390, and the lap times are indicative of this. While the RR Cup bikes are quicker than Honda's CBR 250 race bikes, they're still a good 2 to 2.5 seconds a lap slower than the race spec KTM RC390s and Yamaha R3s around Curry, and this gap is only likely to grow at longer racetracks. Now, since this bike is aimed at a higher level of racers, I'd like to see it eventually offer more in terms of rider development, with features like adjustable suspension and the ability to tune the engine or select sprocket sizes. While the stock Michelin tires are perfectly adequate, stickier rubber would be great too, as would lightweight race bodywork. TVS says that this project is a work in progress and that the bike will evolve over time. In fact, the RR race series will even go overseas once exports begin, but the company isn't commenting on where that will be just yet. But for an amateur like me, the RR's encouragingly planted and friendly nature is something to be grateful for, and you'll soon see why. I've just returned to the pits after qualifying, and that was a very interesting experience. So halfway through the session, it started to rain, and this was my first time on a racetrack in the wet. I didn't even realize that the surface was wet. I was so focused on my braking points, my lines, my corner exits. I just didn't realize until I had a big slide and I almost lost the motorcycle. Luckily, I'm back in the pits in one piece, and I have managed to qualify one place below last. My goal for this weekend, I think I'd be really happy if I can beat just one of these national level guys. The rain continued all afternoon on Saturday, and the track conditions were so bad that our race was eventually pushed forward to the first thing on Sunday morning. But the weather gods were clearly having a good laugh up there, and boy was I in for an unforgettable experience the next day.
Alright, race 1 is over, and all I can say is I'm happy I survived that. Those are some of the most sketchy conditions I've ever ridden on the racetrack. It started wet, then the sun came out and it started dry, and then it started raining again and it got completely wet. I was completely lost on the racetrack. I think I fell back about 8 or 10 seconds from everybody, but by the halfway mark I started to figure it out. I understood how much I could brake, how much I could lean, and I slowly started catching people again. I managed to catch up to one rider, but he crashed in front of me. Ultimately, 3 guys crashed out and I finished 9th, which was still last.
Thankfully, the conditions were much better for race 2, and I was able to pick up my pace by a good margin. But the same also applied to all my rivals.
Alright, here we are at the end of race 2, and I'm glad to report that the sun stayed out for this one. The weather was lovely, the track was dry, and I tried my level best, but I could only stick with these guys for about 2 laps. What I did not know was that this race was 15 laps long, unlike the 10-lap race we had earlier today, and I was wiped out at the end of it. Ultimately, I leave knowing that I am nowhere close to as fast as a national level motorcycle racer, but that's alright, because I had a blast riding this motorcycle all weekend, and I leave telling you this. The RR 310 has a lot of potential, and this could be a very serious motorcycle to race on in the coming seasons.